First of all, hello everybody. We're going to be doing a review and discussion about Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. I'm joined tonight by my friends H.C. Tirpitz, who I'm sure you all know, High Chancellor Tirpitz,
Hello.
and Strategist Shiro, who I'm also sure you all know pretty well. I'm basically just going to be asking questions, and we're just going to get into a conversation, and we'll see where things go. Be warned ahead of time that this is a spoiler full uh, discussion. So if you have not seen the film and do not wish it spoiled, please see the film first, and then come back and check this out afterwards. Okay, that's your one and only warning. Anytime anything else after this, well, you've just jumped in with both feet first. All right, so I'm gonna turn it to you two. What were your thoughts? So we'll have Shiro and interprets, and give me your thoughts of the films, and then we'll take it from there.
Shiro.
I'll start off simply with first of all, hello, because I didn't get to say it earlier. Secondly, I enjoyed the movie, but I did not like the movie, if that makes sense. It's a good popcorn movie to me, but as a summary for Star Wars third trilogy slash Skywalker saga, could have been better. Could have potentially been two movies, actually, but that's the long and short of it for me.
Yes. It. I enjoyed it, and I'm gonna go see it again on Tuesday. But I'd agree with that. It spent too much time trying to rewrite the previous movie, and then it was just rapid fire nonsense until we got to the end, which was a little
I
quick.
can definitely concur with that, especially where it felt very, I'll say, segmented, for lack of a
Yes.
better term, with the way once you had expedition data dump, cut to the next one, expedition data dump,
Mhm.
action, cut to the next one, action data dump, exploration, cut to the next one. Just kind of shuffled around wherever they needed it.
Yeah, I wrote down for that. Things are happening. Why? I don't care.
Pretty
You,
much.
you know, it's just it was like if you ever accidentally hit skip chapter in a movie, that's what that was.
Yes.
So
I
yeah,
was
I've heard a lot of about the feeling very slapdash, kind of put together. Like the flow was not good overall.
Mhm.
yeah. I can
Yeah.
definitely agree with that sentiment.
All right, how about you two give me a synopsis of the film overall? This and then like where you felt in the movie that things kind of worked and where things didn't work, and then we'll get into a discussion about what you guys liked about it and then what you didn't like and some things that you thought maybe they could have done better.
Tirpitz, go ahead.
Scavenger hunt makes subverted expectations.
I
Is
can
that a
agree with that.
summary? That's not a
That's a good
summary.
summary. Yeah, no, that's a good summary because that's all the movie was a 2 hour 22 minute scavenger hunt.
That's what it felt like. I'm sorry.
Actually, no, hang on. I'll do it. I will do it one better. Picture your Easter egg hunt, and then picture finding the last Easter egg, and your brother or sister just decides to step on it.
Mm.
That's how I would phrase that, especially with how the Sith Wayfinder scavenger hunt ended up being.
Oh yes. It's a little out of order, but I have to say I was so disappointed when that wasn't a holocron.
It looked very much like one,
I
except
was like,
for
oh,
the pointy bits that actually pop out.
yeah.
Were they
No, it's
allergic
gonna
to
be great.
using a holocron or whatever? I mean, that
I,
is Star Wars canon.
I know, and they ripped stuff from, you know, books that they disavowed for this movie, but then they just kind of ignore holocrons entirely and say, no, no, there's only two of these. A little odd.
So I also heard that the Knights of Ren played a part. I don't want to say big part because I've heard that it was like really fantastic 3 minutes.
Oh no,
Yeah.
the Rights of Ren did play a very big part, much like how walking played a very big part in the first two of the three Lord of the Ring movies. It was extremely crucial to the plot.
They were there. They had a pretty cool. I mean, they looked awesome.
Agreed.
Their ship was cool,
Also agreed.
and they showed up for like the last. I mean, they really only did anything for the last like 5 minutes of the movie.
That's
And
being
it was
generous because it was like 30 seconds of
it was
Kylo
30
just killing them.
seconds, and it was yeah, it was like Kylo Ren was unarmed, and that's why they lasted as long as they did. It felt like Sith Inquisitors from name any Star Wars animation, but dialed down to like half strength.
So it's like Sith Inquisitors getting their ass handed to them by Darth Maul.
Yeah,
Except they're not Sith Inquisitors.
and they don't have the Force. I don't think they used the Force. They didn't have
Nah,
lightsabers.
I saw no light weapons / lightsabers.
They
I
didn't
saw
even
no
have.
force power. I didn't even hear a voice to anybody.
No, they didn't talk once. They didn't even have those weird sort of lightsaber weapons from The Last Jedi. They just had
Which was
literal
cool.
metal weapons that had RGB in them.
If they even had that. I mean,
Yeah.
again, the bastard sword plate sword guy basically just went like, look, I have 2 pieces of welded sheet metal with a stick.
Yep. Yeah.
So what you're telling me is they've tried to fight Kylo Ren with the power of LEDs?
Yes.
Yes, it's PC Master Race versus Console Wars. The
Wow.
Inception.
Wow.
It just didn't work.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Like I hear a lot of people said, well, if you checked your like love of Star Wars at the door and you just went in for it, it was better than some of the other movies, but some of them meaning like the other like prequel, not the prequels, the other sequels that they just had in the
Yeah.
trilogy, but like it was very much a way to try to make up for the last film, but there was way too much exposition.
Far too much.
And I
And
don't
from
know.
what I heard, had it been edited slightly differently, the exposition wouldn't have been needed and the film would have been better.
Uh, Definitely that. As we kind of talked earlier at the one point there, Melk, I literally said where it's like, oh my god, that's Lando. And then Poe being,
Yeah.
the inheritor
Yeah.
of the audience, hey, that's General Lando.
Yeah. Poe is basically the audience. The whole movie. And
I decided they have secrets.
I wrote down, where is it? It's like when people suddenly appear because they needed to, not because they had a reason to be there or they arrived in a ship. It just felt like, bam, there they were. I just wrote bam, all caps.
Accurate.
It's
Very
just like
accurate.
suddenly they were there. What do you know? I don't know. I don't get me wrong. I love seeing Billy D. Williams on the screen again.
For sure. I mean, he has, in my opinion, aged gracefully for the role.
Oh
where
yeah,
he does justice to old Lando.
and
Although the
I
ending part was
honestly,
shit.
yeah. Oh no. Um, if you don't count what they did to him in Solo, he's actually probably the one that came out most healthy.
That's
Well,
wow.
considering I heard they murdered Chewbacca.
He's wallpaper.
Okay,
He's there.
what happened to Chewie?
The most eventful thing I remember is he got captured.
So they try to find the clue that Luke left off at on like some desert, not Tatooine planet that I can't remember the name of and don't really care, holding a quote Festival of
don't
the
know.
Ancients, which happened to be celebrated once a year for the last 42 years, which magically is when
Yeah.
Easter egg time.
C-3PO
New
even
Hope.
says something like that. What good luck.
Yeah, because New Hope is 42 years old.
Yeah.
With requirements there. So they find the guy's ship and immediately get stuck in like black tar quicksand.
Yeah, it was weird.
I mean, it wasn't like that before when you saw them walking initially with the wide shot,
No.
and it's like, how would you not notice this?
Best
It just
part.
magically shifted an entire shade of color.
Yeah.
And then when they fall into said pit, it's like, okay, well, we found the dude. Yeah, there's his dead body. And here's this like massive desert snake that's hissing and ready to kill us. And I'm Rey. I'm the power of Rey. I'm gonna heal it with force healing, which is legitimate power, but I don't know
Yes.
how she would know it because that's been lost to the ages.
Yes. Yeah, and one thing I was kind of confused on, because some people say force healing is a Sith power, and some say it's Jedi. I don't know if that matters in this case because she did, like you said, just learn it because.
I'm gonna say it's more of a Jedi power because we see it more in the expanded universe from some Jedi Masters,
Okay.
including one of the ones who was voicing here. I can't remember her name, but she's
Mm,
from Clone Wars, and she was the one who trained uh,
what was a
Baron
shock?
Opress or whatever her name was. Not
Is,
not the chick
is, it,
with the
sh-
dual red lightsabers.
is it Shock T?
That I think it's Shakti. Yes, where
Okay.
it's kind of like green skin. She's got the like nun style headdress.
Oh no, that's shoot.
I think
She's
I
a
know who you're the
completely
one.
different race, but I know who you're talking about.
Wasn't she
She's
one of the ones that actually ended up turning over to the Empire?
I think
no, she ended up being
no.
captured, and she was the one they used in Rebels to
Oh, the one to
lure
lure
in
out.
the Jedi.
Yeah, yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Was
Yeah,
she the
this
one
is
that taught Barris? Shoot, what's her name?
Varen Opris or Opris, or however you say it.
Yeah.
The one that ended up framing Ahsoka
Yeah.
in Clone Wars. Yeah, that one. Anyway.
Yeah. Yep.
So the whole healing thing happens, and as the snake goes down through the tunnels and fucks off because it's like, oh, I've been healed. I don't care that there's a food source anymore. It
Yeah.
magically pulls its tail, and oh look, there's the exit.
Wouldn't you know it?
Okay, there's the convenient segue that we're gonna go through. So let's hop on and go. All right, guys, we're outside, and there's the ship. Okay, well now that we are safely at the ship, let's see if we can find the wayfinder or the clue. Oh, Ray senses something out there. Oh, Ray's gonna go check it out. Hey, Chewie, go after. Chewie goes after. Knights of Ren capture Chewie. They start flying off in a transport. Ray tries to pull the transport down.
And
Kylo shows up. Kylo pulls the transport as well, trying to push Rey to further her powers and
yes.
try and get her to the dark side, to the point where she loses control and force push and pull, or sorry, force pull only, becomes force lightning because
Yeah.
apparently, you don't need a spark because it's the force, which I would still think some form of science would
I,
apply.
I just have to say, I read what was it, the Darth Bane trilogies,
Oh, those are
and there's a whole 3 chapters on Darth Bane, one of the most badass guys I've ever seen, try to learn how to use Force Lightning. It took him at least months to learn how to use it.
Took a very long time for him, and Darth Bane is considered one of the most powerful Sith
Yeah.
known.
He's like at least the very most proficient or the fastest learning, and it took him that long to do it. But Rey somehow turns the Force pull into zip zap Force
Yeah.
lightning.
But point being, ship clearly explodes because force lightning hits it.
Yeah.
And then, oh my god, Chewie was in that transport. Jesus fuck, she just killed Chewie. Okay, well there's her start to the dark. Like there's the legitimate start to
God.
the dark side. Like that's
It-
I felt
if
bad
I-
because to me that's a
Yeah.
very good mile marker for a change.
Yeah.
And then cut to 5 seconds later with, but we have a prisoner, sir. Here, General Hux, look
Mhm.
who it is. It's Chewie.
I
That wasn't the transport.
I legitimately was like, as much I love Chewie, but I was rooting for the dark side fall. At that point, I was like, oh wow, do they have stones to do this? No.
But
5
Tirpitz,
seconds
you know why
later.
that happened, right?
Because
Disney owns the Marvel Universe, so therefore nobody dies except for Uncle Ben.
oh no. Shoot. Nobody dies except for villains and cardboard cutouts.
And Bambi's mother.
So yeah,
Mhm.
that's the whole Chewie dying debacle that
Yeah.
very shortchanged us, in my opinion.
And the thing was, there was no two transports where they were.
Correct. We only ever saw the one. It's not
There
like
was only
it's not like you saw a tiny one going off in the distance. It
yeah.
was just on that one solely.
It's
And it
literally
wasn't
the only ship.
even in the wide shot. You don't even see like the guy Ochi's chip. You just
No.
that's all you see is the
Yeah.
transport.
So it was a
Kylo,
bait and
and Rey.
switch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
It
you
was
don't
a-
see where the switch was.
It's like
So it
at
was
the
just
other-
basically a bait, and then we just fooled you.
yeah. It's like unless the other transport was behind a rock, Finn didn't see it, and it flew low to the ground for some
Wait,
reason.
I think I figured this out. Somebody forgot to edit the other ship into the scene.
It could
Well,
be that.
I
but
mean, they
then
forgot to put Ochi's ship into the same scene, so probably.
The other thing that we get is where later on, as we move to basically it's one of the quote colony planets. Think of it like almost built into an asteroid.
Mhm.
And Rey is sitting there, and she all of a sudden it's just like, there's a Star Destroyer in orbit. Chewie's on that ship. Like, you wouldn't sense him before
I know.
flying the fuck away?
I have that somewhere. It's like she senses, or she thinks she killed Chewie, despite being like what, maybe 300 feet away from him, but she can sense him in orbit.
Yeah, that's and entering the atmosphere. Apparently, amount of level pressure matters.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know.
There's too
Maybe
much
she's
desert
a-
oxygen here.
Maybe she's the size queen, and the ship size matters.
Jesus fuck.
Wow. Well, I guess that brings me to a question I want to ask, because what I've heard from a few other people is basically that on the whole, the movie, like, you didn't feel like you wasted your money going to see the movie. However, I think this movie kind of has, from what I've heard so far, suffers from what I'll call Fallout 76 syndrome, where it was released before it should have been released and they could have used a few more weeks of editing.
I would
Yes.
agree to that. I mean, again, I would be fine with this being a 5-hour movie. I would fine with this being a 2-part movie.
Yeah.
And simply because, as we've stated prior, the amount of retcon and exposition that has had to be done is what you want to see in a second movie. The way the trilogies work is the first one establishes your characters, it establishes who's good, who's bad, and a gist of what your stakes are. Like, why is this happening?
Yes.
And then you move into the second one where those stakes become real. You see the consequences of trying to get to where you need to be as the hero or the villain. And it tends to end on more of a cliffhanger note. Then you have the third, and there's also, that's where your exposition, that's where your kind of seeds are for the reveals that come in the third movie, where you have your payoff, your reveals, and your sum up. And this was 2/3 of a second movie and 1/3 of a third movie.
Yes. Okay. He put that how I would say it, but way better.
Yeah, I mean, this is the point where I feel like I am happy. I'm going. First of all, I want to put this out there, is that regardless of a lot of the stuff I've heard about the Rise of Skywalker, I still feel like it's a movie that's worth going to see, especially if you're a fan. The thing I do feel like is that I do feel like going into this, having heard things ahead of time, I feel like this is the one that required people to kind of determine if they were going to go and see this in the theaters, or if they were going to wait for this one to come out like on, digital.
Yeah.
Because
For sure.
I feel like with Star Wars, since Disney took over it, like The Last Jedi was, in my opinion, was a great movie, but it was essentially a retelling of the first Star Wars movie. There were a lot
Oh,
of parallels
you
between
mean,
them.
You mean
Force
Force
Awakens.
Awakens, yeah. The
Yeah.
the last, yeah, that's one. The Force Awakens. The Last Jedi to me was enjoyable. I didn't hate it, but at the same point, I feel like it went in an entirely different direction than they were starting with in the Force Awakens. And I'm not gonna go into the whole, Ryan Johnson thing or whatever. Yeah, that's a different video. But I think, like,
This-
I really think that the best of the movies to come out since Disney took over still has to be Rogue One. I really think that
mm,
Rogue One, even though it was a prequel and we knew what was going to happen, I feel like it did a better job telling a story overall. And I felt like, as a movie that I went to go pay to see, that the payoff was there. There was no part of that. In fact, I would say Rogue One was the first movie in a long time to make me feel like I was a kid back in the original trilogy going to see a Star Wars film. Even though the themes in Rogue One were a little bit more adult, because Rogue One was definitely not geared at kids, especially with the way
no.
the attacks and the violence
Oh yeah.
was leveled in that. People actually died in that. Like, it wasn't
That was
Oh, a lot of
that was
people
like
died.
yeah.
that was like taking the kids' veneer off of it and saying, "Well, we're rebels. We have to keep our secrets, so we have to kill our own people if they are about to get captured." People actually die on screen.
And there were
Rather
actual
gruesomely.
consequences. Yeah, there
Yeah.
were actual consequences to what's going on over there. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that that's what made that film much better in terms of like I think that's what made that film overall I think the best film that came out since Disney took over. I
That
will say I feel like, and that is my opinion, mind you. I mean, that's how I feel about it personally. I know other people may feel differently. I know I heard some things about Solo from people that said, "Hey, it was a great film. It just didn't feel like it fit in the Star Wars universe."
that's yeah. That was my take on that one.
Yeah,
Rogue
Yeah,
One
for sure.
was the best to me. That and it made me actually not scared of Darth Vader because I'm not 5, but I could see why he would be terrifying because they actually could do stuff with him this time.
It
And
made
you know,
you
in the modern,
understand Darth
yeah,
Vader.
it's from the
Because
original trilogy. It just he was like, okay, you know,
to put it simply, like we see the buildup of him becoming Darth Vader, and then we see him as Darth Vader going through the Galactic Civil War. But
yeah,
he's very politically much a pawn in that aspect of I am the presence, I am not the tool.
mhm,
And seeing him in Rogue One was seeing him in the era before the Galactic Civil War fully taking place, where he was the tool, which we see a lot in the expanded universe comics and books, etc.,
yeah,
where he will just hunt and cut down any Jedi he can find to the point of it is a severe obsession.
yeah. And Solo, I would agree. It was a good movie. I liked it. Thought everybody played their parts pretty well.
I felt like it was the Ant-Man of Star Wars.
But yeah, it was just kind of like, well, why? It was enjoyable, but it didn't need to happen.
yeah, and I think that's kind of why they are opting now to do the Disney Plus thing as far
Yeah.
as it goes for some of the, like I think the Mandalorian is probably the best
Mm.
thing to come out since Rogue One. I would probably have to say.
Oh
Uh,
yes.
and
Definitely
again,
up there.
it's one of those things that, of course, I think we're all waiting on Dave Filoni's next masterpiece because we know that the next Clone Wars series is going to be of the same caliber that the
Mhm.
other ones were, based on the fact that Dave Filoni is just has a good track record with that and Rebels. Really, I mean,
Yeah.
both series were
Yes.
really really well done and tied nicely into the universes that they took part in.
If I'm allowed to have a Dave Filoni tangent for this very quickly.
Yeah, go for
In
it.
multiple interviews, YouTube videos, whatever you want to watch, behind the scenes and featurettes of Rebels, Clone Wars, and all that, very much do you always see him humbly go back to saying things like, well, I learned from George. I did a lot of studying under George. I asked a lot
Yeah.
of questions while working with George, because he not only wanted to be able to add to the universe and see the layering of what the creator had for it, he wanted to fully understand it and get encompassed by it to further wherever he wanted to go. And not just be like, okay, well, we're going to do the Mandalorian because people love Boba Fett. It's like, no, like he would say, I want to add the Mandalorian to further show the Mandalorian culture, what the history was. Go back and say, okay, well, here's what was happening during New Hope on Mandalore, because we do have things coming there, which we will see in the coming Clone Wars season, where there is the liberation of Mandalore.
Mm.
Well, I think that's the other thing that I have to point out here is the fact that the showrunner for The Mandalorian is Jon Favreau, and I mean he's another person that really
Oh,
basically
John Favreau.
he started. Let's not forget that Jon Favreau was single handedly responsible for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like without Jon Favreau
Mhm.
pushing on it, with at the time I think um, he was working on it with Kevin Feige as a team, but
Yeah.
without Favreau writing Iron Man and directing Iron Man and putting his name, out there. I mean, that was a risky venture too. We didn't know what
Mhm.
was going to come out from that. Who would have thought that that would have been
Oh,
where it is now? I mean, and Favreau, I feel comfortable with at the head of a series too because of that. I mean,
yeah.
Very
look,
much so.
I mean, we all have our aliens versus cowboys moments, but
I like that movie.
I
It's
still
weird.
it
It's a
was
good
still
sit down, turn your brain off
it
movie.
was still an
Yeah.
enjoyable film. And I mean it wasn't a bad
That
film.
and Olivia Wilde.
I mean, I'll never say no to her.
Right. But yeah, John Favreau is why I like Iron Man so much. I admit his movies are why I started reading the comics. I had no access to those kind of things when I was growing up where I was, so I never got into them. But those movies made
Good
me
for you, Tirpitz.
go on the interwebs and find copies where I could and read them. And Robert Downey Jr. and Jon Favreau made Marvel for me.
And I think I just want to point one thing out because I mean, a lot of people will have already gone on and gone through the negative, and I don't really want to steer this as a negative reaction to
Yeah.
Star Wars because it's important for people to understand that everybody's entitled to their opinions. And regardless of whether or not you personally like a film, like I think J.J. Abrams has kind of taken a lot of flack for this film because, you know, a lot of the decisions, I mean, all of the decisions were his ultimately
Yeah.
at the end of this. But, you know, I think he's also said, I'm done with this too at the end of this. That's the most recent tweet I got from him. But I also really want to go on point of saying, you know, J.J. Abrams, it was a big move to take on this project. And yeah, maybe everything didn't work out exactly the way everybody had envisioned it. I still have to commend the man for taking on a really a legacy like Star Wars and trying to bring some new life to it. Even though we were wrapping up kind of very much the old original like trilogy and the characters specifically focusing on the Skywalkers, I think that's one of the things that I still, yeah, at the end of the day, regardless of whether or not you think the trilogies are good or we think the trilogy was good or bad or whether or not it adds up to the first two, because again, like I said, when the original prequels came out in the early 2000s, as somebody that had been in the original generation of Star Wars fans, I still enjoyed them, and I never thought, well, Lucas is destroying Star Wars. And it's funny because a lot of people from my generation or like the generation slightly before me that watched the movie and loved the movies, you know, a lot of people initially kind of went, "Oh, these are terrible." And now you see a bunch of people who grew up with those as their trilogy, as the ones that they were first introduced to Star Wars seeing,
Mhm.
still hold they might hold the prequels up as kind of their favorite films, and I think it's very much something that becomes subjective. You know, 20
Yeah.
years down the line from
Yeah.
now, we might be looking at a generation that's like, oh, I love J.J. Abrams Star Wars. Yeah, the other ones are good, but J.J. Abrams and what Ryan Johnson did, they were my favorite movies. And as a kid, yeah, I could see that very much growing up because I think at the deep and heart of Star Wars is it is a tale that is based on mythology. I mean, that's where Lucas originally went
Yeah.
to with Star Wars, looking at mythology for the hero's journey.
Space opera.
And also because he wanted,
Space wizards.
yeah, and he liked Flash Gordon as a kid, the
Yeah.
old cinematic ones. So he wanted to make something that had that kind of feel to it. And I have to say this for bringing everything into that, regardless of what you think of this film or not. I mean, this isn't you guys, but like in general, like what people think of this film or not. It's something that's designed out there for one reason to give us a story that can entertain us for 2 hours when we go into the films or more or less in some cases, and to kind of give us a chance to kind of live in another world that was brought to life by a bunch
Yep.
of talented people. And overall, I mean, for me, I'm still going to see the film. And I think that listening to like now, at least I go in as like I always say to people when you're going to buy something, you should always go in with your eyes open when you're going to go see a movie.
Mhm.
And if it's something that you have any sort of emotional investment, like I do, to have certainly have an emotional investment with Star Wars, will I go see it? Absolutely. Because there has not been one of the trilogy films or any of the Star Wars films that has come out that I've just been like, you know what, I'm going to skip. No, I go see them in the theaters because I like the feeling that I get when I go into the theater. Much like how Kevin Smith always says that when he goes to see a Marvel movie, it brings him back to going to see films with his dad. For me, it's when I go see a Star Wars film and very much a Kevin Smith film, they take me to different parts of my life where it takes me to something that I always enjoyed. And it's that sense of just watching what's going on the screen and enjoying it for the spectacle of going to see the movie and enjoying it simply because I like the universe that was created and I like to see other stories in that universe.
Yeah. I'll say no matter what movie it was, whether I enjoyed it or not, I always try to go to Star Wars movies in theaters.
Same.
It's fun, regardless of how it turns out.
One of the YouTubers, to jump a little bit back on the track here a little bit, that I follow a lot is called Jeremy Johns, who
Mm.
he's one of those guys that has the red background for movie reviews.
Yeah.
But when you see him talk about Star Wars, like it started off with any spoiler talk, it's him with like the Star Wars bed sheet from being a child wrapped as a cape, which you know that's a fan when you are willing to put yourself on the internet in that kind of fashion. And he brought up a very good point on how it could have been restructured if Abrams had taken all three movies. Where picture if at the end of Last Jedi you hear Palpatine's voice message. Instead, you just hear the laugh and then the message of him saying, "I've returned," to lead into the third movie, and how much more different that would have made the tone of all of Rise of Skywalker.
That's one thing that I've, even the people, like some people I like to watch to try and help structure my own reviews, not to base them off of theirs,
Same.
but just kind of get to it, is do you know Mahler, or I don't know, I guess they're called the quote long men on YouTube, and they're rather critical, and they didn't like it or anything, and that's their prerogative to do, but
They objectively critique it, essentially.
they do that, and they kind of go in order, and they point out things, and a lot of people see it as nitpicking, and I can kind of see where they're coming from at certain times, but I don't know, they
Try to find a better way to phrase it.
yeah, they're more eloquent in ways that I try to argue things sometimes. I gotta come back to that thought. I lost it.
That's fine. So I'm going to quickly jump ahead to the ending real quick here
Mhm.
and ask Tirpitz a question.
Mm.
Two-part question, Tirpitz. So first of all, what did you think of Rey's self-built lightsaber and how it was designed with the hilt, and then the color of it, which I will wait to let you reveal.
It looked like a hard drive component,
I can agree with
honestly.
that.
Like the thing in the first movie that she ripped out of the. Oh, that brings me back. I'll answer your question, but the thought I was trying to finish was, if they had to choose, they'd rather J.J. Abrams been in charge of all three movies. That's where I was going with that earlier. But back to the start, lightsaber. Uh, it honestly looked like a ship part, which I thought was, fitting for her character.
Very scavenged together like her staff was. Yes, I
Yeah, it looked like something that she pulled out of a ship and cobbled together. And the color was almost like Bastilla shot, or how you say her name.
the easiest way I will phrase it is temple guard.
Yeah, it's to me it was kind of like she's almost like a Mace Windu color. She's walking the line, kind of deal. She's not going to fall one way or the other. Was how I'm hopefully reading that.
Yellow, from my recollection of what I know, is that majority of the yellow lightsabers that we see within the universe tend to fall to a Jedi that is not necessarily part of the Gray Order or a
Yeah.
Gray Jedi in of itself, and they do walk the line. But the best example I will give is the Temple Guard, because the Temple Guard were the people that it didn't matter what you were. If you're trying to fuck with the Jedi Temple, they're gonna fuck with you back.
Mm. Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
the last time we saw a yellow saber like that really was Ahsoka Tano
Mm.
in
Yes
Rebels.
and no. Ahsoka was more white. She was more of like an actual pure kyber crystal, because she was not a Jedi or a Sith. She was essentially just not even a Force user.
She
She
was
was
just
just a
a.
person with a lightsaber.
Yep.
She had the history of it, but that did not characterize her. That didn't contain her. It
Side,
wasn't the being of her, I think is the best way I can phrase that.
side
So,
note, I wish it's my own thing. It's not a critique on Rebels or anything, but I almost wish Ahsoka could use almost all the Force abilities and not go one way or the other. She's just kind of indifferent to everybody's cause. But that's neither here nor there.
I think that, well, from what I understand, and you guys will have to tell me this till I see it, was there mention of Ahsoka, or were there hints of Ahsoka in the Rise of Skywalker?
if there was, I did not notice them.
I want to say yes because I believe her voice actress Tara Strong. I believe if I who also does Harley Quinn. I'd have to double check because it's been a while. But she is quoted. No, it's not Tara Strong. Sorry, I know I'm incorrect there actually. But anyway, she is part of the quote at the point where Rey is actually facing Palpatine as, and for lack of the better term of you not seeing the air quotes, all the Jedi, which threw me for a bit of a loop
Yeah,
because you hear a lot of voices in that cut line.
I was like,
It's
what?
almost every single Jedi in the
It
series.
felt like the Avatar, the Last Airbender. I was like, she's
A
not
little
the
bit.
incarnation of the Jedi. She's just a Jedi, maybe.
Like there's a point you even hear the Hayden Christian
I know. And you hear
Anakin
Yoda
line
multiple
of
times.
"I'm the one who brings the power to the Force," or "I'm the one that restored balance," which
Yeah,
again, his prophecy was correct. He did restore balance to the Force with the rule of two.
reducing
But
Jedi to 2 people was absolutely balanced. Oh man. Yeah, no. If Shiro might have caught something that I didn't, but
there was a lot of lines in there that I had to replay in my head and try and figure out who it was.
I'm I'm seeing it
And I
again
know I'm still
Tuesday.
missing people.
I can give you a definite answer on after Tuesday.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I'm going to cap this video off ultimately with my reaction after I actually do sit down and see the film, which should be Tuesday
Actually,
or
I can say
Wednesday. Oh yes, that's right. But
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I would say overall, still from everybody I know that's seen it, and regardless of whether or not they ultimately wind up being more in the positive or more in the negative, I think everybody pretty much said you need to see this for yourself to make your own
yeah.
judgment on it. I mean, that's the gist of what I got, and I watched most of the Angry Joe like deep discussion on that because I do find a lot of times that he and I share a lot of the similar views on certain topics, but there are a
Mhm.
few that we differ on. Like, I mean, some of the stuff with the going on in the video game industry.
Oh yeah.
That's a point
I
where I kind of sometimes veer away from what a lot of others typically think, only because I look at things sometimes also from the corporate side of things too, and realize that yeah, while certain things are designed to make money, some of the it's important to realize that some of that money does go to pay the devs, and those people do need to get paid.
yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. I agree with Angry Joe on a lot of things, but certain things we'll definitely clash on if we ever talked about it.
But I mean, I think that's one of the things is that as much as anything about this, I want to now just to kind of wrap up this segment, and then we'll have some other discussions in a moment. But I really kind of want to I want to ask you guys both. And I'll start with you, Tirpitz, and then Shiro pick it up. Like overall, your personal feeling. And I'm not asking for like a ratings number, but like just like your overall thought on the film and whether or not you would like tell one of your friends to go see it and things like that. So I'm gonna start with you, Tirpitz, and then we'll go on.
I definitely tell everybody to see it. Just I mean it's the cap of the trilogy, and it kind of as much as it's choppy, it does retcon a lot of stuff from the Last Jedi that I really did not like. And out of everything that's come out of Disney, aside from like the solo movies, and I don't mean solo, I mean like Rogue One, Solo, anything else they've put out from the trilogy, though, it's probably the most enjoyable to me. So I'd say go see it. And if you don't want to think too hard, you don't have to. That'd be it.
Shiro.
So a lot of what I'm gonna say is gonna echo Turbits. I will tell people to go see it because, again, for the sake of it, it is the end of a very long trilogy that multiple generations have shared. I would tell them not to dig too deep into it and to not go in with super high expectations, but I would also give the advice of go through that, digest your first view, and then even if you don't go back to the theater to see it again and you wait for it to come out on digital release or Blu-ray DVD, sit down and watch all three again, because then you can really see where that shortfall is and how it could very easily be shuffled around to get that cleanup to feel like the solid trilogy we have with the first three and 4, 5, and 6, in my opinion, anyway. But I'm also the guy that will watch Clone Wars with all of 1, 2, and 3 to make it feel completely full.
Well, I mean, I do think that Clone Wars definitely fills in a lot of the missing development. Again, Lucas was see. I think the main problem with Clone Wars or the prequels was that there was so much that Lucas had to fit into 3 films. That is why a lot of the character development did not feel as I want to say fleshed out until you got the Clone Wars series, but both the animated one and then the 3D one. I think those really fleshed out the characters more. I mean, you got a much better appreciation for the relationship that Anakin and Obi-Wan had, as well as also having a much better appreciation for how Anakin really did fall in the prequels, and how Darth Vader was born and what that really looked like. And I think the ultimate, like I said again, that's where I think Rogue One kind of showed us that side of Vader that for many people that didn't read the comics or didn't see him in some of the extended universe books beforehand, now got to see that Vader, which is why he was so feared, which is just in that like I want to say minute to 2 minute long scene. The way that was shot, the way it just portrayed him as just mercilessly just butchering, and you can't say anything but butchering the rebels, was just, it was the first time I think a lot of people saw Vader as he, as the full on Sith that he was. Yeah.
Yes.
So I mean that's yeah.
I wish I could have more.
Yeah, I know,
Right?
I know.
Like,
But
it's just that one taste is never enough for us for that.
yeah.
It was just perfect.
But I mean that's I mean overall though, that does, again, I think that was an important scene because it added a lot to the story and the character of Vader. And I think that, I mean, as we go on and now that we've gone through, I would say now that we've gone through what we've seen of the Skywalker, the last of the Skywalker trilogy, I would say we'll probably be able to go back to this in a couple of months and say, oh, well, look, yeah, this definitely added here. And there's stuff that was added here that I like. And we'll be able to kind of put things in a little bit of more of a better order without everybody still kind of digesting the film. And of course, there is always going to be some, especially in the day and age that we live, I think there's always going to be a little bit of influence that comes in from the, Reddit, things like that, where you read these articles and then you say, yeah, that kind of maybe, maybe some things you'll agree with, maybe some things you'll disagree with. But ultimately, then I think it's down the road once we kind of like 2020, as hindsight is 2020, you kind of get a fuller appreciation of things. And I want to thank you guys both for being a part of this, because it was important for me to have more than one person that I knew it would have an appreciation for these films and that would have some sort of an emotional investment in these films. Like I know you both kind of did on especially on the Marvel stuff, because I know there's over the past couple of years, I know like both you Shiro and you Tirpitz were like super excited when Marvel films came out, and then we all went to go see them and we could have good discussions on them. So yeah, thank you guys so much for this. I'm going to put this episode up first, and then I'll put up a follow-up episode for when I go see it to give some of my follow-up thoughts to what we discussed today. And so I'm going to cut this here. So I want to thank everybody else for tuning in to watch this, and hopefully you enjoyed what we discussed here. And I'd love to hear what you guys think.
Take something from it.
Yeah, exactly. And I hope that if you have any opinions, you share them below in the comments section. And with that being said, this is I'm Melkindor, and again, I'd like to give my thanks to Strategist Shiro. That's your cue, Shiro.
I said thank you.
Oh, and High Chancellor Tirpitz.
Stay moist, my friends.
And again, for me, I will catch you guys around. Look for a follow-up video within the next couple of days. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good one.